Right. So many of you know Daniel from so many study creations before, from many of our Daniel is a most gracious host and presenter and multi-talented person. And today he is the featured star guest of Psych Creative, which we are very honored to be hosting today, Daniel. Daniel today will be speaking about resonance and revelation, exploring the human voice as an agent of creativity, healing, and liberation. So, isn't that just marvelous? Daniel is a composer, singer, songwriter, and voice actor, as well as a writer, amateur filmmaker, and visual artist. His vivid dream life has influenced nearly every aspect of his creative practice, and in high school, his interest in dreams led him to the work of Jung, Robert Johnson, and Marion Woodman. After graduating from college with a BA in music, he took a nearly 10-year detour into the field of clinical psychology. In 2015, he completed an MA in counseling psychology, and after a year's break, he began a doctoral program in clinical psychology. During his period, Daniel presented papers at the International Forum for Psychoanalytic Education, and he performed an original piece, Songs of Unquiet Desire, at the Art and Psyche Fourth Conference at UC Santa Barbara in 2019. During this period, he also co-produced Freedom Girl with singer-songwriter Liv Lombardi, and in 2022, he released his own surreal road trip EP, I Remember Telling This Story. However, after nearly 10 years of inner conflict, Daniel withdrew from his doctoral program. Since then, he has redirected his energy toward his creative practice. In 2024, he collaborated with the poet and artist Emmy Vi. Hello, Emmy, I see you're here. On the short film, I Just Wanted to Grow Tomatoes, which he edited, animated, and scored. He also released Scattered Dreams, an audiovisual poem inspired by six dreams. In May 2025, he began releasing new songs, including My Heart, Sink or Swim, and is it Vocatus?
I think it's vocatus is Latin.
Vocatus. All right. Vocatus or Song of Rest, which are available on all streaming platforms. So, without further ado, Daniel, I'm going to welcome you one more time and hand it over to you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rula. It's always so interesting hearing your own bio read back to you. It's very interesting now as I'm about to take you all into this, that so much of that bio is actually woven into this presentation. So I somehow made it relevant and not just kind of self-congratulatory. I just want to thank you all for being here, for your attention. Yeah, and for your time. I think you will really enjoy this. There's going to be a mixture of a lot of creativity as well as some research, some storytelling. And if you've never, if you're not familiar with my work, especially at the LABRC, I would say look for thematic and energetic connections, and don't go super literal, but everything that I described in the talk proposal is in here if you look for it. So I am going to start sharing my little PowerPoint, and we'll hit play. And really, I know how this goes with the speaker view and the PowerPoint view. Really, the PowerPoint is like a placeholder for me to keep myself organized so I don't go off into space. Excluding a few videos, if you want to use the slider and keep it small, you can do that and then make it bigger when there's videos. That's what I would do. But unless you don't want to look at my face too much, you can keep me small. That's totally fine. Okay, so I must create this talk from nothing. So with nothing in mind, a particular vision from ancient Greece comes to me, a memory of creation from Hesiod's Theogony. Composed somewhere between 700 and 730 BC, roughly 2,700 years ago, Hesiod's Theogony is a cosmological poem that details the origins and genealogies of the Greek gods and goddesses, as well as other primeval forms and forces, such as Gaia or Earth and Erebus, darkness. But my memory of the Theogony is actually derived from author and scholar Chris Downing's live retelling of it. It was September of 2016, during one of the first sessions of my doctoral program in clinical psychology. Chris stood at the podium in front of the class. A dark gray dress was draped over her small but taut form. As always, she spoke with clarity and confidence, occasionally stomping her heel for emphasis. She said, Hesiod describes that in the beginning, there was void, out of which Gaia emerged. But the word isn't really void. It's described as a gaping yawn. Then Chris raised each of her index fingers and brought them close to her face. She opened her mouth wide, her fingers standing guard like sentries, drawing our attention to the formless emptiness filling her mouth. In that instant, Chris created a void, not of abstract darkness, but a warm physical opening. Etymologically, the words void and voice are connected, one associated with emptiness, the other with sound, but both are infinitely generative. Last year, as an experiment, I wanted to create something with my voice without using a predetermined chord structure or key signature. I wanted to begin in a kind of musical emptiness. I set up my microphone and recording software, added some delay effects, hit the record button, and began to sing. As I listened to the delayed voice calling back to me in alternating pitches, I changed pitch and tone in response. I called, it responded. I responded, it called. I then layered more noises on top of it, inhales and exhales, mouth noises, more singing, until I felt it was complete. I don't know what compelled me to make a video, but for reasons unknown to me at the time, it started with a photograph of my open mouth. In a video editing program, I zoomed in very, very, very closely until the image was unrecognizable. Then I had the camera perspective slowly zoom out. I added layers of effects, haphazardly changed the settings on those effects, then rendered the video. Then I took that video, zoomed in and out again, added more effects, and on and on and on until it roughly matched the length of the vocal piece I recorded. The result was something I never could have predicted, and it was, in its own way, a depiction of nascent creative energy. I wanted to find the title of this piece in another language, which is what you see on the screen, something ancient that would recall a much earlier civilization. I named it Shuduga, which is, according to the internet, the Sumerian word for creation. To me, the finished piece resembles an audiovisual petri dish. It is one way to depict the first stirrings of life, be it biological life, the life of an idea, an emotion, a new relationship, a dream. And it all started with the sound of my voice and the void of my open mouth. So here is Shuduga, which you should be able to hear, but I am going to double check. Yes, we're still sharing. Here we go. There we go. Part 2, voice as me. The first time I heard a recording of my singing voice, I was horrified. I didn't realize a human being could sing so out of tune while subjectively feeling like they were completely in tune. I was about 10 years old at the time. The following year, while standing in a pew during one of my many, many Catholic school church services, I realized I was singing in sync with the changing intervals of music notes in the hymnal. I was elated. It was like magic. Unfortunately, 1 week later, puberty hit me really hard. My voice dropped, and I lost all control of my voice for another year. The next big leap came a year after that when I stopped trying to sing like a tenor and accepted the depth of my voice. Almost immediately, I heard and felt vibrato in my voice for the first time. I was 14 and I was stunned. Suddenly, there were more possibilities laid out before me. Soon, I began writing songs, and for the next several years, I performed in houses, basements, cafes, and bars. But my ability to emote and to control my voice was fairly limited. Basically, I had three options: loud and angry, soft and sad, punchy and silly. They were bright, vibrant colors, but they had little variation, especially when performing for an audience. Later, while studying music in college, I had another pivotal artistic experience where I, for the first time, heard a recording of myself in which I did not hear something disappointing or alien. It felt like I could hear my own soul. That's me, I thought. That sound, that movement, that emotion, that is me through and through. The song was the final piece in a larger project for a composition lesson. For my final project, I had given myself a set of rules. I would only use my laptop's built-in microphone, and I would only utilize found noises like traffic sounds, machines humming, and other affected noises to create surreal industrial soundscapes. I used my voice, but only previously recorded pieces that I could stretch and bend until they were unrecognizable and more or less non-melodic. I achieved this goal for most of the songs, but toward the end of the project, the stream of creative energy I'd been following eventually subverted all of my rules. This is often the case. It's as if the creative flow of life is saying, you cannot fit me into a predetermined box. Accept it. For the last song, I took an excerpt of something I had improvised for another song, and then I reversed it, added some delay effects, layered bits of the original unreversed version on top of it, and suddenly I discovered a new world. I listened to it over and over again, astonished that somehow I had found myself, a true sense of myself, in this strange little snippet. For my final in this experimental composition lesson, I was given two very large amplifiers to play these songs through. They were easily 10 to 12 feet high. My assignment was to assignment in quotes was to blast my songs across campus while students and other community members attended a nearby visual art and animation festival. I was sort of like the unofficial musical guest. I remember laying on a large concrete slab, staring up at the stars as the song looped over and over again. It was like burning an incense made of my voice. It perfumed the campus, the city, the sky. The song is called More Blue Rooms, and I later released it and other songs on a little EP I called Headphones Recommended. I made this visualizer video to accompany the song for this presentation so that you would have something to look at while it plays. So here is More Blue Rooms. Part 3, Voice as Symptom and Cure. Throughout my life, I've had all sorts of inexplicable symptoms, such as stomach pains, migraines, chills, and insomnia that have no clear physiological cause. When I was in college, I experienced a bizarre symptom that only occurred when I sang. It was the summer before my final year, and I was singing one of my own songs in my home. As I reached the dramatic and loud climax of the song, I began to dry heave uncontrollably, as if my body was trying to vomit out some intangible substance. This happened any time I tried to sing past a certain dynamic range. Interestingly, when I performed at my college's weekly open mic night, I sang without symptoms. It was only after taking voice lessons, in which I often cried a lot, that this symptom eventually abated. In a way, I sang through the singing symptom. It's strange because even now, I don't really know what was going on then. Perhaps it was my body's attempt to purge something I couldn't symbolize in art, thought, or feeling. Maybe it was a bizarre attempt at self-preservation, some archaic vestige of childhood trying to reassert itself, as if to say, stay silent, stay safe. Regardless, once these strange dry heaves abated, they never returned. The next symptomatic experience I had is, in terms of its ideology and message, much clearer. Many years ago, I began withholding many of my honest feelings in one of my friendships. I was very young at the time, so this largely occurred outside my awareness, but as we got older, the pattern became more evident, and as a result, it was becoming more and more painful. At one point, I was supposed to take a trip with this friend, and the night before leaving, I was racked with anxiety. I couldn't sleep, and as the morning approached, my throat began to tighten and swell. I had to cancel the trip, and I spent the weekend in bed. At the time, I didn't ask myself what was going on with my throat. Instead, I focused on my insomnia, which was quite common until recently. A year later, almost to the day of the throat tightening, when I was finally honest about all of the feelings I had withheld, I blissfully cried my eyes out. But then, within 2 hours, my voice disappeared entirely. Instead of tension or swelling, suddenly I had no voice at all. My voice was gone for 3 days. I now understand this as a kind of cocooning process. Like a caterpillar, my old voice crawled into a chrysalis, dissolved, then congealed and reformed into something else. I'm not sure if it's emerged as a butterfly yet, but I remain optimistic. I think this process is constantly happening, albeit on a subtler level. Our voices are constantly changing. They respond to and reflect our sense of ourselves and our environment. You might notice that you actually breathe more easily around certain people or when you're alone. You might notice your throat tightening up around certain people or only in certain situations. You might find yourself pushing, forcing enthusiasm and energy where, in reality, there is none. This creates unnecessary tension and strain and ultimately drains you of vitality. I need to drink some water. So if you have water, join me. Our voices also change as we age. When we're sick, when we smoke or drink or eat certain foods, our voices give us away. People know in an instant if we are a native speaker of a given language. They can hear if we're from the same region or not, if we're confident or not. People make instant assumptions based on the sound of someone's voice, their facility with the language, the depth of their voice, sibilance or lack thereof. They may assume immigrant, uneducated, educated, gay, straight, man, woman, black, white, just from the sound of our voice. Our cultural conditioning rears its head both in our own speech and in the way we listen and interpret others. We rarely listen without filters, especially when faced with the unfamiliar. Instead of approaching with curiosity or interest, we run from the new, clawing at old familiar terms and categories to try to fit the unknown sound and the unknown person into a prescriptive box like a social coffin. It's like pinning voices, pinning people like dead butterflies into a display case. Keep them behind the glass. It's safer that way. This can make marginalized, fearful, and unconfident people feel even worse, which moves us into the territory of shame. Shame has many definitions. It varies based on historical and sociocultural context, but in general, it's defined as the feeling, the knowing that there is something inherently wrong with me. Shame says, at a fundamental level, I am flawed, and so I am ontologically unworthy, unworthy of existing. Shame is distinct from guilt, which is usually associated with the feeling that I have done something wrong. In guilt, there is the possibility of atonement. In shame, there is not. In his 1988 chapter on shame, Danish Jungian analyst Per Holtberg suggested that, in its most extreme form, shame is experienced as the threat of psychic annihilation, or death without the possibility of rebirth. This is why we defend ourselves against shame so adamantly. According to mainstream psychological research on shame, chronically shamed individuals typically utilize avoidant behaviors and retaliatory rage. Psychoanalyst Molly Mann observed that shame is so intolerable that people frequently disavow their feelings of shame, instead replacing them with depression, rage, or even guilt, the latter option offering the false possibility of atonement. As many researchers and scholars have observed, when we feel ashamed, we want to hide, just as shame itself tends to hide from conscious awareness. Many authors also explicitly acknowledge the positive function of shame, because this painful feeling can keep us from speaking or acting in ways that can get us ostracized or rejected from our families and communities. Holtberg even described shame as the bridge between the inner and outer worlds. He also described that shame is related to the archetypal other, by which he meant the biological human others that we must share our world with. However, repeated instances of shame have no positive or life-affirming function. In her 2023 article, When Shame Becomes Deadly, Jungian analyst Christy Taylor Jones described repeated experiences of shame as toxic shame, deep shame, the shame of existing, and lethal shame. Unlike other unconscious aspects of the psyche, both Taylor Jones and Holtberg emphasize that chronic or toxic shame cannot be psychologically integrated. For the Jungians in the audience, these authors argue that shame is not part of the shadow. It is only destructive to the ego. It is life-killing. Perhaps it is akin to what Marion Woodman described as the deaf mother, which she concisely depicted as life in service of death rather than death in service of life. I imagine chronic shame as a kind of psyche-eating bacteria, and considering that experiences of chronic shame can lead to suicide and retaliatory violence, I do not think I am overstating my case. Interestingly, much of the shame literature emphasizes the association between vision, gaze aversion, and shame. In other words, when I feel ashamed, I cannot tolerate being seen. Do not look at me. I feel too exposed. I want to disappear. Shame researchers Tagney and Deering noted that shame states can be observed physically in downcast eyes, rigid or slumped posture, and gaze aversion. However, as far as I can tell, none of the research I reviewed mentioned speech or the voice in any detail. None of the research mentioned that when we feel ashamed, it can be nearly impossible to speak. We lose our words, or even worse, we feel we don't deserve to speak and be heard. We silence ourselves, wrongly concluding that people are better off not hearing what we have to say. So it follows that to heal from shame, we must speak. We have to speak and sing what is real to us. And when it feels right to be silent, We can choose to be silent. We don't have to shame ourselves or be shamed into silence. But how does one begin to heal from shame through speech or singing or voice? What are the magic words? I can't give definitive answers, but I suggest you start by listening to yourself. You have to hear your own internal voices and feelings. You have to listen to your body's responses. You have to listen to your own behavior, especially in relationship to others and the larger world. Then you can start seeing, feeling, and hearing what is true for you and what is not. And once you truly start to hear yourself, there is no going back. So I called this a tangential form because I couldn't quite figure out how to work it in a coherent way. But this is about speech and about dreams and about feeling alienated from the sound of your own voice. So in early 2016, I wanted to try a new approach to documenting my dreams. Instead of writing them down, I would record myself retelling them. But I only successfully did this one time. I woke up around 5 in the morning, recorded the dream, fell asleep, and then I forgot about the recording for 5 years. When I discovered the recording in early 2021, I was confused as to who was even speaking. For a split second, I thought maybe someone had taken my phone and recorded a dream on it and then given it back. It didn't sound like me at all. I was fascinated by the distinct sense of alienation. It was me, but it wasn't me. I knew I wanted to create something with it. So a few years later, I started by making the strange voice even stranger. Then I built music around it. And a few months after that, a friend and I filmed a video. Well, after we filmed the video, I don't know what happened, but I lost the footage for another 4 years. And I found it about a month or two ago, and I finished it last week. So it's a long story arc for this little music video. It'll go up on YouTube today, but this is I guess the premiere because nobody other than me has seen this. So I hope you enjoy it.
I had a dream I was I had a dream I was standing in some sort of structure with all these brick columns. And people coming in and out of the structure, but driving in and out of it. Sort of looked like San Francisco. And there was something about Hebrew. Something about Judaism, spirituality. Something happened. In the exact moment I drove into this space, a structure fell on top of my car, completely trapping me inside. But I was like outside of the car watching it happen. And I was stuck, but I could feel that my body was intact, and I kept checking to make sure I wasn't in any pain. And like the presence of like Marion Woodman is there, and I think I'm talking to her too. And then I remember leaning against a wall, like talking about it. And then I remember telling the story.
Part 5, Voices of Truth. There have been a few instances in my life in which I feel my body was possessed by something else, some other force, in order to speak the truth in a situation that had become wildly imbalanced. In many of these instances, I was a child, and the experience of speaking stark truths to adults left me feeling completely drained, as if I was aging too fast. But even though it felt wrong, I had no choice. And every time this occurred, my life ultimately changed significantly for the better. In one instance, at age 9, I told my mother and now ex-stepfather, I do not want to live here anymore. This immediately sent my household into a flurry of arguments and fighting, but all I did was wait. Then, when the dust settled and the room quieted, I said, now that you're all done screaming, we need to figure this out. Within minutes, phone calls were made, and within a few days, my brother and I moved in with my dad. In retrospect, I can see that we all knew that that situation was untenable. There was so much dysfunction and turmoil, it was making all of us crazy. We knew it wasn't going to last, but for some reason, fear, uncertainty, or good old-fashioned Midwestern denial, no one wanted to admit it. I had been having stomach aches for days. They were getting worse and worse until one afternoon, I actually felt like my abdomen was going to pop. That night, something took over me and spoke through me. I wasn't quite dissociated, but I was partly outside of myself, both behind myself and inside myself as something spoke through me. As the words came through, I knew I could never take them back. Decades later, I experienced this again, albeit much less dramatically, when I left my doctoral program in 2022. I had been in that program for 6 years and in the psychology field for nearly 10, and it had never felt right. Letting everyone know that I was withdrawing permanently and that it was all over had a similarly transformative effect on my life. Suddenly, the ground was gone, and I entered a void, a feeling which lasted well over a year. This had all been prefigured by a dream I had had in 2019, 3 years before, in which I was stuck on a rock face. I knew I could not climb back down, but I was too scared to move into the darkness ahead of me. As I clung to the wall in a state of painful indecision, a little girl with a shaved head wearing a pink dress leapt past me like a monkey into the dark without an ounce of fear. It took me much too long to follow her, but eventually I did. And as I ventured into the dark, I learned that the void isn't nearly as empty as it seems. Rather, it is filled with the wind of possibility, the energy of creativity, and the promise of freedom. And I think I'm going to end it there.
Daniel, wow. You're such an amazing writer too. And, that's leaving apart that your story is amazing and the findings were just incredible. There are so many meaningful connections here. So, and I'm pretty sure there are lots and lots of questions flooding in. So once again, bravo, Daniel.
Oh,
And
thank
we
you.
will now, Thank you. And we will now open the floor for questions. So, who would like to jump in first? Sarah, do you see anyone in the chat who's got questions? Let me have a look
See
here.
someone asking if the videos are public on YouTube and what your YouTube channel is, Daniel.
Yeah, so it's called Psych Creative. It's the Psych Creative YouTube channel, and I can share the link right now. All right, so Daniel, I might start in the meantime while nobody else has any questions so far, so I'll let the questions cook up and the comments flood through the chat box. I love how you said that shame is like a psyche eating bacteria. And what it does to not just the psyche, but also the body itself. Um, I mean, obviously it's a very painful, it's an excruciating experience. But then again, the journey from that towards the cure, how did that feel? Was it equally painful? Was there a pain for the cure itself? Or was it like a moment of realization when you knew that, you know, everything is okay? Shame should not be there. Did it happen instantaneously? So how was the experience like with the voice? Did your voice change again immediately, or was it something that happened gradually? Or was it something that you just noticed one day?
Do you mean when I had the tightening or when I was dry heaving?
Yeah, after the tightening.
The tightening. So that was really strange because it was so cathartic to finally say everything that I needed to say and to
Yeah.
really like hold nothing back. It was all very kind, but it was so much more honest than I had been, that it was like I said, I was like I was blissfully crying. And then it was sort of like I just sort of felt things taking a bit of a turn. And then I started realizing that there was something up with my throat and it was just gone. And even though it was uncomfortable and I was kind of frustrated, I saw it as my body sort of rebalancing after so long being in tension, you know, because there was a subtle tension going on. I mean, really for several years, but especially that year. And I thought, you know, this is really what the body does when there's a severe imbalance. It takes time. It's not like flipping a switch and you're just going to be fine and everything's going to be great. So even though I felt a lot better when I lost my voice, it felt much more it felt almost like I didn't think about it this way at the time, but it felt almost like a gift. Like, okay, now we're taking your voice away and you can be in silence. You can think about what silencing yourself did to your body, to, you know, to your emotions, all of that. And I had to be really gentle with my voice. And really careful, really present with my speech. And then by Monday, yeah, I was back to normal and I was fine. But looking back on it, that part, that experience, that weekend in and of itself became really meaningful because I started to understand how the body will change and respond. In general, it's so much slower than we want it to be, you know, than our thoughts. So it gave me a lot of, it made me be patient, which is always a good thing for me in particular. And I love that story because to me, it just is so clear. There's nothing like super mysterious about it. There's like, it's very, very clear what happened, how all this tension built up. Then it was released, but then there was this period where things needed to kind of course correct. And I just had to let my body do its thing.
So you went from the threat of annihilation and the fear of death without rebirth to an actual rebirth.
Yeah. And funny enough, it was Easter weekend.
Oh my
I
gosh.
didn't want to
Synchronicity.
draw too many parallels there, but I was like,
Wow.
this is pretty wild. Yeah, and I had it back by, the end of Sunday. So
Wow. That is incredible. And see, I mean, this is a surefire sign that, yeah, I mean, this is a rebirth of some sort and a major one in your life too. I
yeah.
mean, this has been really, I feel very honored to witness this. Um, and I'm very happy that you shared this story with us. And there are so many powerful connections here. I see a few things flooding through the chat box. Sarah, do you have quicker access to those than I do?
Yeah, I can read the first one here from Elizabeth that says, "Thank you, Daniel. Such a thought-provoking talk. I'm curious if you've found any links between the inability to speak and thyroid health."
Hmm, I
So
can relate to that.
when I saw that pop up on the chat, the first thing that came to mind
Mm,
was a friend of mine who, and this is, this is my interpretation. So, this is just a story I'm making up about their experience, but um, they've had a lot of thyroid issues and have been quite silent in their familial relationships in a way that I think is very painful. Um,
yeah.
and eventually they had a thyroidectomy. Um, and I remember that, like I remember the scar, like the surgery, like I remember that whole, I was there for that process. And I did kind of draw a connection between the two, of restricting themselves, not just in relationship, but also creatively, because they use their voice creatively. And I saw them doing that less and less, and the problem getting worse. Not that there's always a B connection, but that was kind of how I made sense of it. So I don't have any science, not a doctor. I don't.
Oh, really interesting. Um, there's another one from Maruk. Uh, how do you become more familiar with your voice and distinguish it from the outside chatter?
With your voice, the outside chatter. Well, I'm curious about the outside chatter part of that question. Is that, I wonder, is that thoughts? Is that compulsive speech where you're just sort of going through the superficial motions of like, hey, how are you? Um, and not really being present. Um,
Yeah, a little bit of everything. Like so much of your identity is built from, like you talked about shame, right? It's something you absorb, something you kind of like lose your own voice, your inner voice, like I just like I just did right now. Um, but yeah, like how do you distinguish that from what you've been hearing when you grew up, or like how you from like even social media, I guess.
mhm.
Like when
Yeah,
you, yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of noise. That's part of why I actually am not on social media, because it makes my mind very loud. The more media I take in, the louder it gets in my head and the harder it is to hear myself. Um, the other thing I feel like is important to point out that I was thinking about this morning in particular was that the notion of sort of embracing your voice as it is, getting in touch with your authentic voice, all of that is an ongoing experience. I don't really want to call it a process, but it's just something that's not over. It doesn't ever end. There's no achievement badge. It's like you're always um getting closer to it, I think. And for me, I noticed that, for instance, in the story I told about the vocal tension, that was a very old relationship. So that had a lot of patterns built into it that I've outgrown, so that I don't really have those issues in more current relationships. So sometimes that will happen where It's like I'm 90% fine. And then I talk to a childhood friend, and all of a sudden I'm, 15 again in my body, and I'll say things I don't necessarily mean, agree to do things that I don't really want to do, that kind of stuff. So it does vary based on the relationship. I think silence is really important. Being alone in silence is really important. And also, what I didn't mention, and I should have put in, because I did put in all this research about shame, I couldn't find very much explicit research that spoke to healing shame. But what did come up was self-compassion. Self-compassion came up again and again and again as far as healing shame goes. So that's like when you make a step forward and you start to see some improvement in yourself, and then you slip and fall, you don't attack yourself with all of those outside shattering shame voices. You're kinder to yourself. You're like, we're in the middle of a big growth process right now, so you have to have some compassion for yourself, kindness to yourself, which I also think becomes kind of an antidote for negative cultural messaging and anything that you've internalized from your environment. You can start to kind of undo it.
Great. That's a interesting lead into the next question, which is from Kate. Says, I would love to hear more about the voice as symptom/cure, other instances, inspiration for this idea, etc.
For me, thank you for the question, Kate. For me, so the whole thing with the dry heaving, and there was also a whole lot more that went on in that voice lesson, and that I had experienced in other voice lessons. And if you talk to anyone who's singer, music theater, anybody who's gone to voice lessons that I've ever spoken with will admit that they have cried and sobbed in voice lessons, because there's something about being heard, being seen by someone who's really paying attention to your voice, which you can't change. It just activates something. And I think that for me, it's almost like the body is trying to give you a message. So it's like my body was clearly trying to tell me, it could have been my, however you want to frame it, my psyche, my mind, my body, my life, something was not coming through. And so I feel like in my experience, my body is sort of the last line of defense, and it will do whatever it needs to do to make sure I get the message. And the interesting thing with the voice in particular, when I was preparing for this, is that I was like, oh, I've had vocal symptoms, but my voice has also been the cure for those symptoms. So when I haven't been in integrity and I've been lying, when I speak the truth, that alleviates the problem and I can get back on track again. Or like the dry heaving thing, that didn't go away by me stopping singing, So there's an interesting interplay between, for instance, like feeling dissociated, depersonalized, derealized in my life. And then I would record something or I would perform something and I would hear my voice and it was like, there I am. I'm back again. So there is sort of a feedback loop thing that happens there.
Very cool.
Yeah, I see Gottfried has his hand up. If you want to unmute.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your presentation. With for all of it, but specifically within the last thing that you said, you were speaking of your. Sorry, two things. On the one hand, you were speaking about voice, and you spoke in your really wonderful way, almost, or it brought to my mind what in Jungian language is called the self with a capital S.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. And the second thing is when you just a little bit later spoke about the voice being both the symptom and the cure. I don't know very much about it, but is that not also the homeopathic principle? Like cures like.
Hmm.
So, I mean, simplistically speaking, a snake bite can maybe be cured by a tiny portion of, by a tiny diluted portion of that snake poison.
Hmm.
And so it is not only in the voice in the voice as you again so beautifully present, uh, but it's also it feels in a it also feels present in a wider realm, like whatever the
Yeah.
realm is that homeopathy is dealing with.
Yeah, it makes me think of the notion that the cure, the god or goddess that caused your affliction is the same one that's going to cure it. You
Exactly.
know,
Yes,
you
yes,
you
yes.
have to go, you have to go to the source. And as far as the self, I almost did say something about that. I didn't want to go too theoretical in general in this, and I also want to leave that story open,
Yeah.
because it was so mysterious and led, to one of the most really to the one of the first, I don't know what you would call it, paranormal experience or kind of otherworldly experience within a few hours of that happening. So there was a lot going on in that space, and there was something about that, whether you want to call it the self or some sort of higher wisdom, something that came through, again, kind of as this last line of defense, saying this is untenable, this is not going to work. And usually and at the time, I was the second youngest child. We were trying to blend two families, and the youngest kids are always the one with the least psychic filters. They're the ones who they take in everything, and I think that's why that fell on me a lot. But yeah, I appreciate your question. My dissertation won't be published because I withdrew, but I cited some of your work in it. So I'm very honored that you're here. And
Oh, thank you so much. It touches and honored and honors. It touches me, and I feel honored. Just a tiny. I did not mention the self with the capital S as any kind of label. I just meant
oh
it
yeah,
as an association that
yes.
that certainly leaves the mystery, as you so beautifully put it. It certainly leaves that open, and so thank you again, and also thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we have a lot of questions in the chat, so we're going to try to make our way through as many as we have time for.
Sure.
There's another one from Jana or Jana, I'm not sure, but thank you, Daniel. Your work is mesmerizing, and I love how you create a felt sense of sound and dream imagery. Do you feel the texture of words?
Do I feel the texture of words? I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know. Do I feel I love what you asked about the texture. Who's the texture of words? The texture of words. I don't know. I think so. I will share. There were a few pieces of writing that I was going to include that I decided not to, that were part of a Substack that I used to run that some of you subscribed to previously. And I did a lot of different types of writing and playing with words and poetry and experiments. And one of the reasons I actually stopped doing the Substack, and one of the reasons I was even a little hesitant about doing this presentation, was because words started to feel like such a burden, and I started to feel much happier when I was nonverbal. So I started playing music in the morning, kind of first thing, improvising, recording, writing. And that was a much happier way of starting my day than journaling, even though I really enjoyed that as well. So obviously I value words very much, with the voice, but I don't trust them the way I used to.
Great. From Adriana, what are some ways to recover your voice? How do you find the part of yourself that is silenced by shame? Is this a process of active imagination and dream work in the unconscious? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, this is a big question. Big questions. I think something I was thinking about that may help you here is the way we talk about emotional and psychological experiences as often very glib. And what's tricky is that people will talk about feeling shame, feeling ashamed, feeling depressed, feeling upset. But when I am in a state of shame, my awareness has funneled down to a pinpoint and I can't think. So there is no shame. It's like I'm gone. I'm sinking, I'm drowning. There's no me and shame. It's like that's something that Christy Taylor Jones also talks about in that same article, that we become shame. So for instance, a few days ago, I started feeling really deeply unconfident about doing this talk because who am I? What do I know? I'm gonna waste all these people's time pretending I know something. And for a good 2 days, I was sort of grappling with that. How do I get out of this? Which is kind of the question that I think you're getting at. Like, how do I get back to myself? How do I get back to the sense of myself that does know something? And that these are what I came away with in this particular example was that these are my stories. Like, who else has the authority to tell my stories? So that was what helped me start to come back. I'm talking about my life. I'm reiterating other people's research and giving their names. Like, I'm not doing anything wrong. So I think for me, it does come out in dreams. And you can work with it. But I will say that part of me can be so prickly and so untouchable that it's hard to approach. So I think it's going to be different for everybody, but I think you will find when you start paying attention to how you just pay attention to how you feel with different people. Who is it easier to speak around? Who is it more difficult to speak around? Do you have trouble? It might not be an emotional experience. You might actually have trouble finding words. You might sort of go dumb and like, why do I always find that I can't bring myself to say much, around this person or in this work environment or things like that? So I think that paying attention is always going to be a good way to start. But how questions in psychological experience are really tricky. At least I think they are. And I would say also, since shame tends to hide, you might have to get at it indirectly. So it might be something that is only going to show itself when you've convinced it that your back is to it, and you kind of can maybe, which is something that Marion Woodman used to say about the negative mother complex. She compared it to Medusa, who you can't look at directly because she'll turn you to stone. So you have to use the mirror of some kind. You have to use something to kind of get at it indirectly, because it may be too destructive to go at head on.
Yeah, really fascinating. And it's sort of gonna try to condense a few of these into, because
Sure.
they're getting to where they're kind of connected a little bit. So we have
Cool.
a few here that's sort of talking about the creative process and giving yourself permission to experiment and seeing what arises. And in connection with that is the integration of psyche and soma. So pulling all that together, the creative process and dream work and other activities, are there any particular practices that you use?
No. So the way that this looks now is that there's always some sort of inspiration, idea, or curiosity that is you, or just an energy that I don't understand, that will lead me to a particular medium, and I'll start playing with it. And so I wasn't expecting to talk so much about my own artistic process when I was writing this presentation, but I just found myself doing it. And what I have sort of come away with is that whatever you want to do, whether you're drawing, singing, playing music, writing, it's not really about you at all. It's about you're playing a role with this energy or energies, however you want to look at it or understand it. And for me, it's a back and forth. There's like a call and response thing that's always happening. So if I'm doodling, I'll make a line, and then I'll make another line, and I'll make another line, and I just start to see where it's leading me. It's not like I'm gonna do something representational of an apple on a table, because it would be terrible. But I that's kind of how I go at it, which takes the pressure off of me. Like, I didn't plan to make a song with that recording of my voice with telling the dream story when I recorded it. But when I found it later, I was like, I have to do something with this, and it was 5 years after the fact. So I had obviously changed a lot, gone through a lot. So much of it is subjective. So much of it is about where you're at the time. But to give you something, like I said, silence is always good. It's good to start from silence. From every book you'll read about writing will tell you this, about music, about the body. You have to find some way to quiet yourself down, and also not put pressure on yourself to produce something. So we live in this production mindset where we're all supposed to be endlessly creative every season, every single day, every single hour. And then you're supposed to share it online and everyone's supposed to like it. So it sets you up with all of these really insane, like, expectations for yourself. So you have to drop the expectations, and you have to trust what you really want. And that is something that I was going to add in, but it's coming up kind of implicitly in a lot of this, which is that when you've experienced a lot of shame, especially about your interests, which I did a lot as a child, there was a lot of shame. Anything I was interested in, people are going to think you're gay if you do gymnastics. If you listen to female singers, you'll get made fun of. Like, all of these really dumb things that caused me to pull all of my interests, keep them really close, and start hiding what I really wanted, which is one of the many ways I learned to betray myself. So shame will also do that, which makes it harder to create, because it makes it harder to connect with yourself, because you're scared of what you really want. So that's another, you're not even scared. It's like even predates that. You're scared of wanting anything. It's like there's a fear around experiencing excitement because it's been quashed so many times. There's a fear around expressing joy because someone is going to tell you whatever you're interested in it's too expensive, it's going to take you too long. Like, there's all these things that people will say to just stomp on them. So I often will advise people to be careful about who you share your dreams with and when, because it's like exposing a seedling to too much sunlight too soon. It's like it can burn up in an instant. Saying it too soon can depotentiate it. So you have to be able to at least tell yourself, I think, this is the thing that I really want. And there is a kind of a gentleness you need to have toward your body. And you have to let go of all those expectations and all of those voices. So I will stop there before I keep ranting.
No, that's really helpful. I think we have one more question in the chat, and then anybody else who wants to raise their hand or unmute themselves. So this is from Yasmin. As an introverted aspiring artist performer, being in social media functions is almost like a lifeline for interpersonal relations and finding the next projects. I don't know how to balance that with being alone and being okay in my loneliness. and there's a question mark at the end.
Yeah, I feel that even the question mark in the parentheses. Yeah, I understand completely. I complain about this to my boyfriend a lot, that I struggle with needing those connections, even just socially, just to stay in touch with people. And I have, like you're saying, like I have found work through it and I've made connections through it. All I can say is that it just varies. So my body is really, really sensitive to the news, to the media, to social media, and I just have had to accept that. I'm not going to toughen up. It's not gotten better with time, with therapy, with healing. I just am super sensitive, so I have to really limit my exposure, and I have to try to do other things to connect with people. So some of them are in person, depending. I mean, of course, it depends on what your field is and what your sort of creativity is. But yeah, I don't know how to balance that with being alone and being okay in my loneliness, which is another part of this, because there's also a distinction between solitude and loneliness. To me, solitude is very pleasant, and loneliness has kind of a pain and an ache because you want people around, which I think is kind of the introvert's dilemma at the core. It's like you thrive on energy and on people, but it's always kind of too much. And there's a really funny example that Jung gave about like an introvert and an extrovert going on like a day trip together. And it was so, and he sort of used it to show that like one, the extrovert's energy would go up and the introvert was like, I'm not interested in this at all. And then they move into another space and the introvert's like, wow, this is really cool. And the extrovert's like, this is so boring. So there's this constant kind of navigating you have to do energetically. But I think, let's say, to give you a concrete example, if we're talking about something like Instagram, mute people, don't follow anything that is upsetting. Like you just have to don't look at the feed. Like you just have to be really boundaried about what you expose yourself to. That was the only way I could manage it. And then eventually I couldn't. I may end up rejoining humanity at some point online, but for me, something like this is very safe, is very comfortable. I have found a lovely sort of international community through the LABRC. And that's given me a lot of connection. The stuff that I made with Emmy, the video, like that would have never happened without the LABRC. Like I've made all sorts of things that I never would have made if I hadn't come here, and I hadn't volunteered and connected with people. And I always leave the conferences, and I'm not just trying to plug the organization, but it's a great one. But I often leave the conferences feeling completely exuberant and like filled with energy, optimistic, the opposite of how I feel when I'm on social media. So maybe it's more a matter of finding a community or communities that feel like home, and that you can also, and this is something that's true for me, I can modulate my exposure to this community. It's event based, it's like very specific. It's not I don't constantly have access to it. So yeah, the end of rant. I hope that was helpful.
Great advice, and we love having you as part of this community, and I agree, it's a great one to be a part of. We'll leave I think we have a few more minutes if anybody has questions, and I would love to ask a question.
Yeah.
I love this idea of the dream that you had, that you did the voice memo to yourself and then came back to all these times later. As you know, dreams are sort of my rooting and creativity as well. And I find so often in dreams that I can do what you're talking about, come back to them year after year, even
Oh,
5
yeah.
years later, and find something totally new.
Yeah.
So I'm I love that you've created this. I wonder if you have an idea of if you might come around to it again.
Come around to using dreams like that?
Well, to playing with this dream. It seems like a
Oh,
pretty potent dream. And if you have more designs on something to do with it, or if you feel like you have gotten what you can from it for now, and maybe it will linger in the future.
well, I don't know. You know what's funny is I didn't think about that, but it has really not left me alone in nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is kind of wild. But they do that, and there was something about making that video. So, when you're editing a video, you drop your footage into a timeline on the computer, and it's just typically it's like one big chunk until you start editing it. All we did was film me in my bathtub, and I wasn't planning on editing it at all. I just was like, low energy, low effort. We're just going to throw some filters on this, put this online, move on with my life from this song and this dream, whatever, which did not pan out at all. And to your point, what started happening was when I started playing with some of the textures, like overlaying brick onto my skin, because there was brick at the beginning of the dream. I added this flicker effect. And when I put myself upside down toward the end and the light was flickering on my face, I was like, I look like I'm in an asylum somewhere. Like there were so many other things that started to come out. And then at the end, I have what I called like my God face, where it's like my face just sort of takes up the end and there's all the little green spinny things. And it started to make me think about, being a narrator and a storyteller where you're sort of this non-personified voice. So it's definitely, and now that it's out there, it'll sort of spread to other people, and they'll, take in the dream and the images and the story. So I don't know if I'll do more with it. When you're recording something and you have to listen to it 1,000 times before it's done, and then I made this video and I had to listen to it like 1,000 more times. I still actually enjoy it. So I'm glad of that. And I'm really proud of how the video turned out. But I don't know, the dreams, as far as dreams and artwork are concerned, the dreams sort of step forward themselves, so like the other piece that I did, scattered dreams, those 6 dreams were all from 6 different Julys. I had a really horrific nightmare this past July, and I started looking back at all these other dreams I had because I hate summer. I had all these other dreams in summer, and I wrote them all out and I turned them into poems, and then I just kept condensing them and condensing them and condensing them. And they all sort of came together, and so they stand alone as these 6 little mini poems, but then there's also an arc to that story that's sort of about me, and about kind of like you, Sarah, like being somebody who spends a lot of time in that world. And you're, as far as the society is concerned, like you're kind of a weirdo. Like it's like the end of the video is like, basically the implication is like, now I have to wake up and pretend to be a normal person. And that was something that was in the last dream, where I said I have to use the front door like a normal person. And so that was kind of a message to myself, which makes me laugh. It's kind of it's a little bit of a dark angel, that video, but yeah, it's another example of how, recording your dreams and working with them, writing about them, for me, I stopped caring about narrative. I stopped caring about the order. The images are what stay. The images are still timelessly alive, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. And that is what keeps me coming back, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Ray, have your hand up.
Thank you for your presentation, Daniel, and for your honesty. Appreciate it very much. I have a lot of different random reactions.
As one should.
Yeah, a lot of this. I don't know whether this will be coherent in any way, but I was thinking, in light of what Gottfried said about self with a capital S, that the cure is to become yourself. With the capital S, and we're all on that path to, quote, finding our voice. As a poet, they tell you need to find your voice. And there's those days when you write lines and you just know it's just not quite right, and you don't exactly know why it's not right, but then you do know when it is quite right. So it seems to me that trying to find the voice of truth within is what in Eastern religion is termed enlightenment. And to go to singing with the voice with singing, during your presentation, I was thinking of blues singers who are not just trying to express some kind of pain, but they're also expressing some kind of truth within themselves they know, in reaction against their being shamed by society. So it's an anomaly, it's a paradox. If the cure is to become yourself, that the voice indicates the extent of your illness, at the same time as the voice can eventually be that which leads to cure. I sang backup vocals in a band for several years, and the singing was all an experience of ecstasy. And I've always thought that, gee, if I can get my poetry, the voice in my poetry, back to how I felt when I was singing backup harmony vocals, that would be great. But thanks very much for the presentation. The last thing I'll say is this phrase, I've been reading some philosophy lately, and the phrase came into my mind: physician, heal thyself. And I looked it up, and it's actually from the Gospel of Luke. And it's almost like, Gottfried can tell me if I'm on the wrong track, but the Jungian analyst is helping you to heal yourself, to find, is assisting in helping you. But ultimately, it's a path that we're all on, and we have to do it ourselves. And so probably, because I also experienced early in life, I had to leave one way of doing things and going to another halfway through my undergraduate years. Probably the leaving of the PhD program was something that you needed to do because it wasn't true to yourself and who you were.
Yeah. I think, what was coming through a lot of what you were saying was that, we really are the cure for ourselves. We are the ones who can lead ourselves back to health, back to balance, and really back to integrity. And I think that is kind of, I think one of the dangers, I think we all know this, but in its best function, projection can lead you back to yourself, but it often doesn't. In my experience of just watching human beings, one falls off and then they just throw it up somewhere else. And that was what I did with grad school. I wanted the especially the Jungians back then, I wanted them to tell me how to live. I thought they were wise and knowledgeable about life, and they were into dreams like I was into dreams, and I thought they would have the answers for me. And I went back to school a second time, even though I hated it the first time, because it was familiar. Just like we go back to, the same type of abusive partner or the same type of unhealthy job situation. It was familiar. It provided a structure. I knew I could thrive in that environment. But the interesting thing was that period of 10 years was the most difficult period of my entire life in terms of creating. So I was living kind of a performative life as like a super codependent trainee therapist, very perfectionistic, achievement oriented student. And I was miserable, side note. And it was also becoming really, really difficult to make anything. It was becoming this arduous, challenging, like conflict riddled process that it never had been prior to that. So now that I've come back to myself and things have gotten comparatively a lot easier, I can see that. But I think that when you're living out of integrity, when you're spending time in shame, it's hard to connect with anything. It's hard to connect creatively. It's hard to connect with other people. And the way I always described it was that throughout my 20s, it was like my intuition was gone. And I had always been a highly intuitive person. And suddenly it felt like I was making decisions by internally flipping a coin. And I hated it, but I didn't know what else to do. I was like, I have to keep living. But it always kind of felt like being in a boat without a rudder. It was like, okay, well, I guess we're doing this now, and it was like leaving everything to chance all the time. Which was
Your presentation made me think of Joseph Campbell's phrase, follow your bliss. And sometimes the ego and success in the outer world is actually the opponent of the creative self. And that's not to say that we don't need an ego. That's not to say that we want to reject the ego, but sometimes it can get in the way of the creative self. Thank you.
sure. Thank you. And I when I was when was this? After I finished the master's program, I read Joseph Campbell's journals. I think it's called A Fire in the Mind or something like that. And I don't know why I didn't take the hint, but when you look at his early life, before he became Joseph Campbell, it's like if you were to chart it on a map, it's like there was so much wandering, there was so much experimentation. There was the period where he was just like, to hell with the academy, I'm going to go live in the woods. Like there was nothing straightforward about that. And so, yeah, I've always, really appreciated Joe and his work. And it's always a good reminder when you look at not just the phrase follow your bliss, but who that's coming from when you really look at his life, because it's not like he followed the rules.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. You are such a talented person, an amazing speaker, and you have shared so much wisdom through personal experience and everything else that you came to realize in your life. And it's been amazing. It's been very touching, very impressive. And how lucky are we to have you with us today? So one more clap for Daniel. And Daniel, you also mentioned that you may want to read a couple of poems. So would you like to do that now in the poetry section of the session? Or you want us
Sure.
to save you a spot? All right.
Sure.
Okay, I'm pretty sure you need a little break now.
I do.
This has been, I think, the longest Q&A we've ever had,
Oh,
which has been amazing too. So yeah, you definitely need a little screen break, a little stretch. So how about we're all back in 5 minutes? And for the poetry lineup, so we've got Hetty, Ray, Gottfried, are you all reading? All right, and Daniel, of course. Okay, so we'll see you in 5, or maybe let's say at 7:35, so in 7 minutes. All
Thank
right.
you.
thanks, everybody.
So we're back. Okay. Daniel, would you like to go first?
Oh boy. Okay. I have to pick which one I want to do.
All right.
We'll go with the dream one because we've been in dreamland.
Amazing.
I don't think I've ever read this to anyone other than myself. So it's called Snake. Yeah, and I don't want to say too much about it because it's a poem. So I'll just read it and you can do what you will. Okay, let me get some water. Snake. To begin at the beginning means to begin with a dream. A baby green snake on a silver table. Not just green, scales like spring grass and mountain pine. It squirms and I feel it like a living, missing limb writhing on a slab. It is strong and severe. Its granular gums gnaw on my hands. It weaves itself between my knuckles and strangles my fingers. Maybe it's a gestural scream. Let me live. Overwhelmed, I leave the room, but sense this feral, undulating wave is my kin. I return to find my unfurling tongue of lime yarn resting near a door I hadn't noticed before. A star hides behind it. What I mean is, a scalding yawn of unearthly white beams out beneath the door. If I even blink, he will eject himself into the light. Still, he is me. I must gather myself. I barely lean, and he's gone. My eyes follow him into the halogen divide. I wake up half fetal, wrapped in beige sheets. I can feel my vestigial dream sun coiled around my spine. Look, this is how it is. I am telling you how it was. For 5 weeks, he climbed my vertebrae and shot his serpentine DNA into every ignorant cell. And now I stand in a black sphere of ceremony, chanting through a decade of psychic time. Thaw these dead limbs, numb with unmemory, frigid with rhyme. Caress this forlorn flesh, spotted with moles, mottled with diffidence. Kiss the forgotten, forsaken, lost civilization of my body, and love me, love me, love me into life.
Wow. How deep. There's more. You've got another one.
Oh, sure. That's a long, okay. I'll read one more. Thank you. This was potentially going to be at the very beginning of the presentation, which I think it'll make sense. It's called Other Realities. In the beginning, there was no words. There was only void, out of which bathtub emerged. Buoyant realities like plastic ducks bump and mingle. I am in the water. Do you see? The water is eternity, is fragrant, is near my skin, the fertile suds of other realities.
Wow.
Oh, thanks.
Beautiful, evocative images. And it's so funny, Daniel, because I had a poem prepared for tonight. It has the word suds, it has the word gnaw, and it also has the word voice in it.
Okay, so we've done this before. We haven't gotten to talk about it, but there's a poem in Rula's book, Simply Being. The first stanza has like 5 of the same very specific words of the first stanza of one of my poems. It gave me chills. Yeah, weird, like weirdly specific.
Oh my God. Which
so
one
yeah.
was it?
I have it. I have it right here. Should I read a Rula poem?
Gosh. Sure.
It's I'm pretty sure it's the first. I think it's the first one in this book. Let me double check. Yeah, it is. Oh yeah, it is. Oh yeah. I mean, I can tell you.
Number one.
Yeah. you want me to read it?
Be my guest.
So this it's by a very famous, long deceased poet. She wrote several hundred years ago. So this poem is called Number One on Jackson Pollock's painting, Number One. Where order is a fist clenched around a string of fog, chaos is the stormy sky, dropping like a stork, paintbrush and chisel into the arms of Michelangelo. In the Sistine Chapel and the David within the stone, creation is a crowded issue, a misty matter, where legions of feelings, hordes of thought, mobs of fantasies, and layers of worlds collude and copulate within the confused mass, huddling, cuddling, clouding, like couples of cotton candy puffs they kiss, dissolving into drizzly dyes, dripping and splashing, sputtering and splattering, the shocked canvas whiteness now blushing with color. From Prometheus to Pollock, chaos, the flute-bearing fracas, self-generating edifice, is a fertile exasperation, the clamor behind the calm, and the nothing behind the something. It is everything.
Daniel, you read my poetry much better than I read it.
It's
I
easier when
think
it's not your own. It's easier when you're not, just trust me.
You have an incredible voice. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you.
Anytime.
And
My
wow,
pleasure.
I mean, the synchronicity here, it's just goosebumps. Thank you so much, Daniel.
My pleasure.
And next we have, well, I see Hedy next on my screen. So Hedy, are you ready? But you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, can I share screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, I have to find the button again. Okay. Did it work? Can you see my, okay. I'll read two short ekphrastic poems. This is a painting by Maria Gast titled and I sort of imagine part of a boat, and this is the poem. Nocturne. While all passengers are asleep, I stay up late, bent over my desk, until rising from the next door cabin, the woman's voice begins to lull her child to sleep, attentive to the rise and fall of her voice. My pencil runs over the page, in a sinuous way echoing the sound of her humming, carrying the stories she will surely tell her child when he grows older, but that for now is rocking him in the manner of an empty score filled with inaudible words, like notes traced with invisible ink, only perceived by me, who records them faithfully night after night, stringing words and sounds waves together, as though weaving a necklace in an unknown language, drowning her child's cries and nightly fears within reefs filled with corals and thick-lipped butterflies, fish kissing away the sadness and longing for the home they left behind and the pains yet to come. And
Beautiful.
thank you. The next poem is inspired by these paintings, which are musical scores by Wadada Leo Smith. He is a jazz musician in Chicago, and he came to Kalamazoo. He had a show of musical scores, and this one is titled 4 Symphonies, and it's the number 3 that inspired me the following poem. allegro ma non troppo. Think of a boy lost in midst of a rippling sound wave. Still hanging from his umbilical cord, he lands on a tipsy summer moon who tries to chase away the shadows from last night's hangover. The boy wants to catch his own shadow with a fisherman's pole that is really a violinist's bow. A page has been turned. There's a gap in the symphony. The boy waves his bow around a dragonfly and a pink-lit orchid. He wants to become the little prince, get closer to the orchid's heart, but she's only pursing her lips for a kiss. He envies the dragonfly's dance. Another page turned, another gap. Spiritual fires rise out of darkness in the moon's secret landscapes. The dragonfly hides under its shadows. The orchid sleeps, awaiting for a kiss. The boy knows he needs to keep in touch with his own shadow and will only hear the music with eyes closed to find out where he came from and what he wants to become. Thank you.
It's so beautiful, and I love this transdisciplinary connection between the symphony. So the theme today was sound and voice, and the poem itself and the visuals, Hedy. It's gorgeous as ever. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And next, Gottfried.
Thank you. Daniel, this is specifically for you, although this is the first time that we met. Towards the end of last week, I was intrigued by the title of your presentation, and this poem came to me. So if you take this as a gift to the wonderful gift that you gave us all. I just need to say, I use the three words holy, holy, holy twice. In the first line, the third holy is WHOLLY. And in one of the last lines, the WHOLLY is the first holy. Sorry, I can't, I just had to say this. So this is for you, Daniel. The voice of creation. Holy, holy, holy. The human voice is holy, as there would not be a voice without breath. And breath, granted us by the grace of the divine long before time began, is life itself, and thus holy. It is breath that's linking us in each and every moment to the sacred. Lets us know that we are one in this holy place existence, where what is seen and what's unseen flow together in holy union. In sacred voice, thus we partake to give expression, witnessing the mystery of our oneness, the miracle ungraspable, both fleeting in an instant, a holy moment like a flash, as well as forever in all eternity. The voice of the divine is silence. It's in my human voice, in sound, that she, he finds expression. In this embrace of mutuality, the giver and the given, and I, as the one who receives, blessed with both life and voice in holy breath, being one. Thank you, Sacred One. for that gift of grace, for life itself within my voice. Holy, holy, holy. The voice of the divine is silence. Listen.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
That was
beautiful.
incredible, incredible.
Thank you. And thank you.
Amazing, Gottfried, as always.
Mhm.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks.
And I believe Ray also has a poem to read.
I'm a little bit stunned into silence by their readings tonight. Thanks to all the readers. I just want to mention from, I probably mentioned this book before, but from Daniel's presentation, a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And
Yes, I saw that in the chat box, and I remembered you when you mentioned it earlier in another session. Yeah.
Brain, Mind, Body, and the Healing of Trauma. It's by an MD, and it's his whole life work dealing with people, and it's how the body retains and keeps things. So I just finished a class on the paintings of Vincent van Gogh, and I read 2 poems last session where Van Gogh appeared. And how many can I read? Okay, so I'm going to read 2 poems where Van Gogh appears in these as well. Disturbingly, Van Gogh did suffer from a mental illness, but that didn't prevent him from painting in the last 3 years of his life some of the most beautiful paintings that have ever been painted. Anselm Kiefer, the artist, has said about Van Gogh that he only painted for 10 years, from age 27 to 37. It's incredible. And Anselm Kiefer said that if he didn't have those last 3 years of paintings, probably no one would ever know that he existed. So it's pretty incredible. But during that time also, he was put in an asylum several times for episodes of a serious mental illness, one of which was brought about after he cut off one of his ears. And so this poem deals with that. Van Gogh cut off one of his ears. What can you do with extreme dread? Anguish rising like a flash flood, sweeping everything away till you are lost in the torrent. You can take it out on yourself, make your flesh hurt more than your soul. Take out the pain you are given, for flesh knows how to heal itself. You can take it out on someone else who's done nothing to you, making them feel the suffering. Your anger helps you to forget. You can take it out on a page, a set of drums, or a canvas. You can make something from your angst greater than this fragmentation. If it were not for his illness, there would be no starry night or crows flying over fields of wheat, no irises in the courtyard. We are sick because no longer whole, and our only transcendence is in this life when we create, become the center once again.
Beautiful.
So the second poem, Van Gogh Appears, I wrote this one before I took this class, and kind of a little bit of a political poem about what's happening in America today with immigrants, but this was written several years ago. Starving ourselves with abundance. At the border, immigrants seek asylum from hunger and strife. They have seen advertisements for red lipstick and granite counters. They believe we are beautiful. They believe we are all wealthy. They know nothing of our despair. They cannot see our poverty. Until they arrive on our shores, until they move to our cities, where they spend years remembering how they thought living here would be. They are glad to work in the mines deep beneath the lush green forests that have been cut down to make space for their linoleum kitchens. Because hunger for this dream life creates an emptiness greater than lack of food and clean water. We have all become immigrants. In his first week at Saint Remy, Van Gogh painted blue irises. In the asylum, he was free of all his false deprivations. They gave him a room and a bed. They gave him food and water. Yet he brought his easel into the garden filled with flowers. There is an asylum we seek beyond our bedrooms and kitchens. We must give up everything to quench the longing of our souls.
Very powerful, Ray,
Thank you.
and speaks so much to so many around the world today. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
So with that, I guess I can read the final poems of this section. Well, as I said to Daniel earlier, there was a poem that I was thinking of reading today that had pretty much similar images. Maybe it's a differently themed poem. So without saying too much about it, because again, let the images do what they want. And they might do different things with different people. But the title of this poem is Ludus, which means playful love. And it is all about the playful nature of the unconscious, but it also has an image similar to what Daniel was saying before about moments of derealization when you hear your voice and all of a sudden you're back. So here goes. Ludus, and this is a very old poem. So this is from Simply Being, it's 4 years old. Ludus, or 1,000 poems. You've written 1,000 poems for me, my friend, in your sapio sudsy head. In a world as real as this one, where the ebb and flow of its soapy tides brush off and on that murky shore, where all that can't but is, all that shouldn't but will, and all what's hidden is naked under that ruthless, roofless hut. Your eyes, 1,000 thought fruits you've yielded and ignored the tree in vain, rejecting, pushing, plucking, peeling, carving, craving, and ultimately feasting upon the forbidden. While gnomes gnaw the inner walls of your cerebral cave, engraving them with cuneiform fantasies, 1,000 lyrics you pen, and sing to that tune of what I recognize to be my own voice. So there's a poem that has voice in it. And there's one that I wrote just a few days ago, which was also inspired by an image and a sound. So the sound of the sea and the image, or actually the memory of me sitting in an olive tree. You know how you write a poem and you don't really know what it's about, but you know how you got there because, again, like an active imagination, the images emerge and you dialogue with them. This is called Aphrodite sensitivity. Sometimes the stars decide to play Cupid, and I sit in a tree. Like now, incubating pits of self, cloning buds that will never unlive again. If only they held one fruit, curled under the tongue, behind the moist warmth of a briny conscience, the way Jonah did. Our lifelines are brush strokes, patting dough balls on canvas, signposting the everywhereness of things. In this place, she is deeply revered. So bring her here, where she is highly sensitive to human voices in foam, to glances that brush the skin. There are certain things that cannot happen anywhere else but here. And thank you so much. That was my short poem. It was wonderful having everyone here today. We look forward to having you join us, of course, in the future. We do have many Psych Creative sessions coming up. Not in July, not in August. So we'll be back in September. This is the very last Psych Creative session of the pre-summer season, and we'll be back in the early fall, late summer. Of course, we also have indelible sessions as well, but again, those will be done with for July and August. We have another one on Saturday. It's actually a book launch. We'll be launching a new book called Echoes of Her. I think I've got a copy here. Yes. So the book launch is hybrid. It's both online and in person. Feel free to join us in whatever way you like. It's on the website, so you can register from there. If you are an LABRC member, then of course you get to attend it for free. We also have an upcoming conference, an online conference. The proposal deadline is the 1st of July, and the conference is titled Synchronicity and Intuition. So for anyone who would like to share their views or their works on any of those two themes, please, we would love to hear from you. The conference is on the 23rd and 24th of July, I believe, online. And we also have, we've opened the proposal window for our alchemy conference, which is in November. We do have a lot coming along between those two, but these are the two that are up and running right now on the website. So we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see you all again. A special thanks to Daniel for being our incredible guest of honor today. And of course, for Sarah, the amazing co-host. And great news about Sarah. Sarah has been awarded with the Susan Rowland Award for Jungian Arts-Based Research, which is the LABRC's annual award for her incredible accomplishments, not just for the LABRC, but for the broader Jungian creative dreamwork community all around the world. So Sarah, you are marvelous, and we would love to celebrate you all the time. And we couldn't have found a better candidate for this award. So thank you for being always with us. And thank you for making Psych Creative so much better and brighter for everyone. And of course, thanks to the wonderful poets and the amazing attendees who joined us tonight. Feel free to rewatch any of our previous episodes on Psych Creative, the YouTube channel, anytime you like. It's free access, and yeah, so it's there for everybody. Wishing you all a wonderful evening, a wonderful day, depending on where you're joining us from. And yes, do email Daniel. His email is in the chat box. So please feel free to get in touch. And as Daniel said, he doesn't have social media, but you can connect with him through email. All right, so good night, good day, and see you again very soon.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Rula.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care now.
Take care, everybody.